Well, hey everybody, so glad you could join me today. And once again, I'm going to show you how to make these very easy, quick quilts. Now this particular quilt, I used the jelly roll strips, as you can see, four individual strips, and quite a few other odds and end fabrics that I had left laying around. And I created the quilt top, and then I purchased a twin size comforter and attached the quilt top to the comforter. So you get that instant fluffiness. So it's a very instant quilt. Now what you can do, you could also sew these individual sections. You could do some more quilting. You could either do it by hand or you could do it by machine. But today I want to show you a real quick and easy way to create a very beautiful handmade home done quilt. See? Pretty. Okay. First and foremost, you want to start with your jelly roll strips, and you can just make your very own strips. That's what I did. I just cut mine out of some really nice fabric and then laid them face to face. And then stitched along this edge. And I believe I showed you that part in another video on the quilting foot. So you just take your jelly roll strips and you put them right sides of the fabric up together, and you're just going to stitch all the way along the edge of that strip. So you want to put 4 strips together, and if you do, you will have 2-inch squares. So this becomes an 8-inch section. It becomes 8 inches wide. And I have another ruler here for it to show you. So this says 8 inches. And if you notice, I put it on here, it's right at about 8 inches. Because I don't know if you can see it, but this blue line, this is the outer part of this ruler, and the inner line is actually 8 inches. So this is like 8 1/4. So we have exactly 8-inch strip. And as you can see, we stitched it, and then I stitched it and then pressed the edges to lay flat. Press the seams down to lay flat. So the next thing you want to do is you want to cut your strips into blocks. Okay, and I've already done that here. And this actually is a little bit different because I did a little bit bigger than 8 inches. But this is one of your quilt blocks. And this one I got a little fancy, but you can just keep it simple. And I can't find my cutting tool, but you can just keep it simple. And these are your quilt blocks. So eventually what you will do is you will take each of your quilt blocks and you can attach the backing to them, and you can do some embroidery on them, but I'll show you that part later. Okay, let me go back to just doing the jelly roll strips. So how did I create my jelly roll strips? Well, those strips were getting really expensive. Okay, I'm going to show you how I cut my jelly roll strips. And I actually have a Sizzix, a die cutting machine. And what I'm going to do with my Sizzix die cutting machine, I actually bought a really long die that will actually cut the strips into the 2 1/2 inch sections that I need. So it's going to cut all the strips for you in this 2 1/2 inch length, as opposed to trying to do it by hand or trying to purchase the jelly roll strips. And don't get me wrong, the jelly roll strips are beautiful, but they're very expensive. So for all the scraps of fabric that you probably have hanging around, or you can even make a quilt out of old clothes or thrift store clothing finds. All I did was is sandwich the fabric onto the die, because I have the base and the die and the fabric, and now I'm going to put the other piece on top, and then I'm just going to roll this through the Sizzix, and you'll see the strips that I get. They're perfect. They're evenly cut. Sometimes you gotta, this is the big kick with the extended cutting boards. And these dies are really, to cut your strips, are really a lot cheaper than purchasing the jelly roll strips. Especially if you've already got a really big stash of fabric. And you just roll it all the way through. Easy peasy. And we're going to just set this aside. We're going to unsandwich it. And as you can see, these dies cut really, really well. And since I didn't go all the way to the end, I'm just going to cut the top part right here. Just going to cut that part off. So these will be open. And sometimes don't pull if you've got some little extra ends. And see, you're going to have a bunch of really cute little pieces left. And just cut straight little line. And so you don't have to do much cutting. And that is pretty much it. So now you have your strips. And actually, there's another little sneaky way of doing it. Because now you have a whole bunch of 2.5 inch strips ready to go, ready to be cut. And another way of doing this, if you make it so the fold of the fabric is right here at the top part. When you cut all the way through, you'll have a piece that is twice as long. And I'll show you what I mean. So I've got my fold at the top. And I want to cut all the way through to the fold. So I need to line that up a wee bit better than I did before. I'm going to pull this over so we get double the amount that we need. I'm going to flip this around because I want to shove it in that way. So, okay. Yeah. So bring it down, line it up. And you can take your time doing this. You're not in any hurry. You need to enjoy what you're doing, get the most out of it. Because you also want to get it right. Got all these little extra fabric strips. And I never throw fabric away because you never know what you can do with it next. So we're just going to put this in here. And we're going to give it a little start. We're just going to crank. And just crank it on through. And this will go straight. All you got to do is just crank. Very, very simple, easy peasy way to do it. Okay, so we got this. We're going to unsandwich it. And right here, we're going to give it a little cut. As you can see, sometimes you get some little pieces here. But those are tiny, tiny, tiny little flaws. Not a problem. I'm going to go ahead and just cut straight across here. Because I should have folded it differently so it would cut it right at the bottom. So my bottom edges would be even. Okay. And right in the middle. Okay. So now, as you see when you open up a strip, it's twice as long. Because you had that fold in the middle than the other strips that I had. Which is okay. I don't mind it at all. So this strip's a little bit shorter, but remember I had the fold at the top on this one. So now I have strips that are much, much longer in length, which is fine. But remember, you're really shooting for squares, so it doesn't really matter that much at this point. But it will save you time in cutting. So that's how I got my jelly roll squares. Now, if you don't have all this fancy, all this stuff, that's cool. You can just cut the strips by hand, or you can, of course, purchase jelly rolls. And let me set this aside. Finally got my cutting room all set up. Okay, so now you have your jelly roll. You have your strips all sewn together. And what you want to do, okay, I know this needs to be about 8 inches because this is the exact size of my square template. And as you can see, it's a little crooked there on the edge, which is okay. But I'm going to take my healable cutting board, which of course has a lot of glue on it. And actually, I'm going to fold this. And, yep, okay. I'm going to fold this in half so that way I can cut 2 at one time. And just going to push this here to the edge. Going to take my handy dandy, and once again, be safe. I don't really like these rotary cutters because I'm always freaking out that I'm going to cut my hand off or something. So I'm just going to take my rotary cutter, hold it up against the edge here, and I'm just going to cut this little end piece off. Oops. Why did it so tight? Okay, because it's got a roll. Just going to cut right next to the edge so we get it all nice and neat. Oops. Gotta give it a little bit of pressure. Okay, so that's cut on that side. I'm just going to swing it around this way. Make sure it's all lined up. And then I'm going to cut. Gotta fix this table. Going to cut right there. Okay, and you notice, of course, you're going to get more and more of these different size quilt squares, so you can either incorporate them into your design or, you know, just set them aside for another project or whatever works for you. So now you have 2 perfect, and obviously you've got to make many, many more depending upon the size of quilt you have, but they're exactly 8 inches square, and now you're ready to go. Now you're ready to start the next step of the process, which is either start with the next step of your process. You can also cut out your 8-inch square backing. And if you're going to be doing this quilt as you go, you go ahead and cut out your squares like that. And if you want, if you have an embroidery machine or some appliques, you can just go ahead and hoop this and make your designs that would go in the center of each of your quilt blocks, or like this one. It's just entirely up to you as far as being creative. But this is getting you through the first step of showing you how to cut out and have your quilt blocks. And with these, you can actually have them going in different directions, or you can cut these in half and attach them together, be a little more creative, and I'll show you that part in another video. So that's pretty much it for this step of the process in your quilt as you go.